this is Dr. Mike, and today I want to talk to you about another aspect of anthropology that we entitle Spirituality, Religion, and Shamanism. Many people will profess to have a religion. Religions play an important role in determining cultural identity in a lot of societies across the globe, sometimes overruling other major identity markers such as kinship or social class or ethnicity or nationality. One of the best examples of that would be Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, who have different forms of Islam, and they transcend all the other markers of class or anything else like that. And so it's important to realize that there are a lot of differences. When you say even that a person is a Christian, you fail to realize that there are different groups of Christianity that are cultural markers that anthropologically differ tremendously. We would define a religion as an organized system of ideas about the spiritual sphere or the supernatural, along with associated ceremonial practices by which people try to interpret or influence aspects of the universe beyond their control. One of the things we know about man from earliest times were that they each had a spiritual sense of being a part of something bigger than they were themselves, and something that they did not have control over, or something that they did not completely understand. And so from the earliest religions, they were seeking to exert control over the world that they lived in, maybe over storms or over the rains or whatever it was. They felt like they needed some kind of divine help or spiritual help to bring rain or to bring healing or all of these things that limited them greatly in their lives on the planet. When we talk about spirituality, basically we are concerned with the sacred as you would distinguish it from material matters. In contrast to religion, spirituality is often individual rather than collective, and does not require a distinctive format or some kind of traditional organization. A person can be spiritual and not be religious, and I think that's an important point for us to understand in this discussion. And you realize that we're looking at religion and spirituality here on a universal sense. We're not looking at it practically or what your religion is or my religion is, but we're looking at it much more generically as an anthropological aspect of our lives as humans. There are a lot of things that we would consider in this aspect of religion and spirituality that are important. Anthropologically, we look at spirituality and religion as a part of the superstructure of a cultural system where people begin to collect a body of ideas and beliefs and values by which members of that culture, as I've said already, attempt to make sense of their world and their place in it. But we also have what we would consider to be myths. That is a sacred narrative that explains the fundamentals of human existence, where we and everything in our world, where it came from, why we're here, and where we're going. You realize that human beings, do not always think of history as a linear association, that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that came about with the ancient Hebrews in what we would know as Christians as the Old Testament, where they begin to have something to look forward to. They begin to develop this narrative or this myth about what's going to happen to us. Is this the only world that we live in? What happens to our family members when they pass away? Do they go to another world, or do they just end? All those things are reasons for the developing of a narrative within religion to explain things. We didn't have any control over death, and we don't have control over illness. We don't have control over the seasons or the crops or rain or snow or whatever. And so how do you influence the powers of nature to do your bidding? Those are all things that come under this idea of myth, spirituality, and shamanism. There are several different kinds of religion, but they're mainly divided into two. One is a monotheistic religion. Mono, the prefix means one. The belief in one God. And we have three major religions that believe in that idea, and that is Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Those three religions, by the way, are all cousins. They all come from the same root. They all trace their heritage back to Abraham in the Old Testament. And so all three of them, from Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, all come from the same root. We share a lot of the same ideas, but we believe that in one God in those three religions. The other form of religion would be polytheism. Poly means many. That you would worship many gods. And if you looked at Hinduism in India, which is the major religion of India, they have 10,000 gods in their religious system, but the belief in one supreme God or divine creator, master of the universe, as opposed to the belief in multiple gods or goddesses in the pantheon, a collection of gods and goddesses are worshipped in a society. And then there is, of course, religions like Buddhism, Shintoism, Taoism. All of those are much more like Eastern religions who really don't have a God personage. It's more about the consciousness of the mind and things like that. So there's a lot of different kinds of religion in the world, and it's important that we understand those. Some tribes in places like Africa or the Hebrides, some of the island nations, will practice what we call animism, and that is a belief that nature is enlivened or energized by distinct, personalized spiritual beings separable from bodies, and that's called animism. They're spirits or forces, and the belief that nature is enlivened or energized by that impersonal force or super energy will make itself manifest in a special place or maybe in a special thing or in a living creature. Probably Voodoo would be the best kind of example of that, in which they will do some kind of a cloth or a doll or something that they believe will inhabit the spirit or will influence people or will change things for the better. Most religions will have some type of priest or priestess, and this is a religious specialist, if you will, that is recognized for his or her role in guiding the religious practices of others and for contacting and influencing supernatural powers. Those differ from religion to religion. Within Christianity, the pastor would fill that role, and yet he's not limited to practices that other religions do. Each pastor or priest is different in the role that they do within their religion. A lot of times that kind of spiritual heritage is passed down through generations. That is not true within Christianity, but it could be true within Hinduism or Buddhism, where a person that is a priest will pass that down to his children, or that spirituality will pass down. For instance, in Buddhism, the Dalai Lama, who is the head of the Buddhist religion, is not married, so he doesn't have children to pass it down to, but they've searched diligently who will be the next Dalai Lama, and they have now set aside a child that's like 5 years old, and he's being groomed to take over that priest position, and so that's quite interesting. All these things go to what we talked about before in our worldview. We each have a worldview, and many times it will involve that spirituality or that religion that we practice. A shaman, which is the third term in our title here, is a person who enters into an altered state of consciousness in order to contact and utilize a hidden reality in order to acquire knowledge or power or to help others. This was very much prevalent in Native American religion. They worship a form of animism and the Great Spirit, and he would dance or transform himself into an altered state in which he would completely believe he left the body and would talk or correspond or communicate with the spirits in order to get answers or to get help for whatever it was that they needed. So that's what a shaman does. There are lots of different rites within religion, and I'm not going to spend a great deal of time going through those. You're welcome to read the chapter and to see how the different religions practice different things. But even magic is considered to be a form of a religion in some form. Some of it is, of course, just for fun, but some magic is a specific formulas or actions used to compel supernatural powers to act in certain ways for good or evil purposes. Magic is based on principles that produces like, sometimes called sympathetic magic. There's a big deal with that in lots of circles, like the Hungarians who travel sometimes as gypsies will practice magic as a part of their religious ritual. There's contagious magic. It's magic based upon the principles that things or persons once in contact can influence each other after the contact is broken. One of the practices of spiritualism and religion and shamanism that I find interesting is the idea of divination. And that is a magical procedure or a spiritual ritual that is designed to discern what is not knowable. Some of you would recognize that in the form of seances or Ouija boards. It's interesting in American history that when the early settlers came to the New World, that they brought many of these elements of witchcraft and these other religions intermingled with them. If you remember, in the early days of Salem, Massachusetts, they had a witch trial in which 22 people were accused, including one who was a pastor, was accused and put to death for being a witch. And there was a scare that went through the country that Satan or the devil had witches everywhere that were doing his bidding. And it was a very small event, not for the people, of course, that were accused and killed, but in comparatively speaking, because at the same time in Europe, over 10,000 people were put to death as witches. So it was a much bigger event there, but this was well within the realm of Christianity. So we carry around within us lots of different beliefs and ideas. Now, we've talked a lot in this course about the fact that you and I, many of us, are from Appalachia. And in the Appalachian Mountains, we have many practices that would be considered spiritual or religious, but maybe intermingle with Christianity. My grandparents believed they were able to talk fire out of people, or they could stop blood with words, or all these different kinds of things. That's not really Christianity as much as it is this folk religion and folklore that has been a part of our heritage for generations. You may know people like that as well, who feel like that they can do that kind of thing, and yet they would probably also consider themselves to be Christians as well. But in reality, that practice would be pagan to the Christian religion. So we have lots of different things. Our makeup as human beings is really interesting because we're not just one thing. We'll be a variety of different aspects and always learning. There's a lot of programming on TV sometimes about things like magic and shamanism and voodooism. Those things are interesting to watch, to realize that they are anthropologically a huge part of who we are as human beings. And so it's important that we consider to think about these things because they're all a part of our worldview. How you see the world is vitally important. Of course, in Christianity and in Islam and Judaism, we practice prayer as a way of influencing the spiritual world upon our behalf, or to ask for the needs that we can't get for ourselves, or to pray for divine help, or to pray for healing. All of those things are rituals. They're tied to the religion. In the Christian church, there's a service called the anointing, where you literally anoint someone with oil and pray over them when they're sick as a way of encouraging healing. So I think most of you would find this chapter extremely interesting, and don't be offended as you read it, because it's not just about your religion, but there's a lot of religions in the world that are equally as serious maybe as yours is, equally as important, equally as vital to the survival of that community. And that's one of the important things about religion that it does. It can bind a community together. It's about shared values, shared morals, shared belief systems that many people will work together and function together with. So as you think about this chapter, as you read that, give some thought to the importance of spirituality and religion and shamanism in the lives of human